Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 65 in the series. I'm calling this one Sleeve Island, and I'll tell you how the weather is over there pretty soon in the next couple segments. I'm coming to you from Urbana, Illinois, where I'm a professor at the university there. I'm in the English department, and it's been really fun. As an aside, I meet so many of you in the comments and Ravelry and via message and things, and I hear so much about your knitting, but I've recently heard a lot about the texts that you like to read, the books that you like to read. I'm teaching a speculative fiction class and a science fiction class, usually science technology studies, so I've heard from so many of you that you enjoy like someone like Margaret Atwood, or you know, you've given me some leads on some really great books, and it's been really fun to get to know you guys that way through your novels and your short stories. So keep them coming. Keep those recommendations coming. I love to read new stuff. Somebody actually asked, like, how do you read and knit? And during the semester, it's a little bit tricky. My day job keeps me reading, and I can read and knit, but I would prefer to listen to audiobooks and knit. So school keeps me kind of busy and away from my knitting. I can't knit quite as much during the school year. But anyway. Let's see, you can find me, if you're looking for me, here on YouTube, and just about everywhere else as Knitting the Stash on, let's see, Ravelry and Instagram, and the blog, which is knittingthestash.wordpress.com. And yeah, today's episode, I've got some sleeves, I've got a shawl that's in progress, and we're going to talk a lot about Norwegian yarn, because We've turned over seasons on the podcast, and we're starting to at least have one segment every cast on knits in translation. And if you're interested in getting into the knit along, or the cow for knits in translation, we have a thread over on Ravelry in the group, and you're most welcome to come over there and join us. And when I say knits in translation, I mean any pattern that's not in your native language. So my native language happens to be English, so anything that's not in English is open for me to knit. And if your native language is French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, what else have we got? Norwegian, whatever you speak. If you're knitting in a language other than your native language, that is fodder for the cow, so come on over. And I've started off with some Norwegian knitting that we'll talk about, and I've sourced some Norwegian yarn for us to talk about. And yeah, so it should be a good show. So I'm going to jump right in with a couple of thank yous and a giveaway winner. I want to first thank Audrey Borrego, who donated 2 patterns during the last episode. Thank you so much, Audrey. And you can go over and check out Audrey's designs. I'll put all of these links, as usual, in the show notes, which are over on the blog. And you can check out her designs over on Ravelry, which are all really beautiful. And I think I described them last time as kind of like classic modern, but like with a little touch of detail to them. They're really, really cool. And I asked you all what you look for in patterns as the question for the giveaway. And so many of you came up with such interesting answers. And I think for me, who's someone who's an aspiring designer, and for any aspiring designer out there, it's like a wonderful list to look at to see what people are looking for when they're looking at patterns. So thank you to Audrey. And our winners, I drew 2 winners because I had 2 pattern codes. Our winners are Julie Larrabee and Lindsay Evoy. I think I spelled it right, or said it right, E-V-O-Y. So Julie Larrabee and Lindsay Evoy. I'll put your names on the screen here. Get in touch with me via email, and I'll send you your code for Ravelry so you can download one of Audrey's awesome patterns. And I have a quick shout out to my dad. My dad watches this podcast every time I put it up. And so I just wanted to say congratulations to him. He just got his Master Instructor's award in Washington this last weekend, and I'm very proud of him. So Dad, way to go. Congratulations, you get a podcast shout out. Some of you might be wondering where I've been the last few weeks, and that is because I skipped podcasting last weekend because Spencer and I were in Del Rio, Texas to visit Phineas, who's our oldest son, and his wife Erin, and their new little baby Charbel. And Charbel was about 6 weeks old by the time we got down there to Texas, and she's just a handful of sweet. So we had a really nice Saturday to hang out with them and do a lot of baby holding and visiting with Phineas and Aaron in their new place down there. He's in the Air Force at the big base down there, the Laughlin Air Force Base. So we got to check out the Air Force Base, check out the baby, and that is why I did not cast last weekend. So I'm happy to be back this weekend, and I hope you all are well, and yeah, let's jump in with some knitting. So let me tell you about Sleeve Island. Let me grab my sleeves, okay? So I've been working on the Rosenblum Sweater, which is a Norwegian design, and I'll put the pattern and the designer's name up here on the screen because I've talked about it before on this cast. And I've finished the body up to the armpits, basically, and it is sitting over here just waiting for someone to work on it. So this is the body all the way up to the armpits. Beautiful colorwork body, and it goes, as I talked about last time, it goes into some cables and faux cables and things up toward the top, and that's one of the reasons that it makes it a kind of introductory Norwegian knit, because you're not having to basically do a lot of steeking, which a lot of Norwegian designs kind of require. It's like one of their traditional pattern parts, like how it works. So at the top of the body, you transition out of the colorwork into some cables, and that makes it much easier to divide for the armholes and knit the rest of it kind of flat in the front and flat in the back. So I left the body where it was because I was feeling pretty good. It's like colorwork's going well. After a little snafu with my gauge, things looked pretty good. And I went on to the sleeves. Well, the sleeves are gorgeous because they replicate the pattern of the body, all the colorwork. Yes, yes, pretty, pretty. But I consider myself a fairly advanced knitter at this point. I've been doing sweaters for, how long have I been knitting? I started knitting in 2012. So is that like 7 years of knitting? Anyway, 7 or 8 years. Lots of pattern modifications, design sweaters, etc., etc. But when a pattern says to me, increase in pattern, and I've only really just started colorwork maybe a year and a half ago, I do my best. I'm up for a challenge. I'll do my best. But this is what happened with my increasing in pattern. I think it's not so bad for a first shot at increasing in pattern. And the idea being that what I wanted to do was, once there was enough space between these two, which happens up here, kind of create a new line, because that's what happens after this pattern. And then once there's enough space, pick up another repeat here of this guy and just keep going. And then here I was going to pick up another repeat of this guy, and then eventually another one of these guys if I needed to. So, okay, those of you who are really advanced colorwork knitters are probably like looking at this and chuckling just a little bit, like, well, you could have put some dots in here, you could have put some little mini, diamonds and things. And I completely agree. And that's what I will do the next time I do this. But the other problem with this sleeve, as I found, was that basically I was a little too tight, either in my knitting or with my colorwork. So the gauge on this looks slightly smaller than the body, and I think it's because I was working in magic loop. Same size needles, but magic loop, and I tend to knit even tighter in magic loop, so I think that's what happened to the gauge. So if I put this sleeve on, it's pretty darn tight. It's like the kind of sleeve where you couldn't fit anything under it, really. And I don't have enough stitches. Like, I've done basically the number of repeats that I see in the photos of the pattern on Ravelry, but I don't have enough stitches, and I'm off by a good like 12 stitches, which means that my increases didn't happen quite fast enough. I did them, they said every 2 centimeters in the pattern, and I did about every 2 centimeters, but it didn't do it quite enough, so I need to fix this. But the trick is, we all know that Sleeve Island is a little bit of a bummer. So the idea of knitting 3 sleeves is kind of like a terrible, terrible idea. So I talked to my guildmates because they know what's going on. And their suggestion was, hey, it seems like it's about the right width, somewhere right up here, right when I start putting in this extra increase in pattern thing. So they were like, well, just, the next sleeve, start it with this many stitches, you know, do an extra round down here, you know, whatever. Start with this many stitches and just go up and you'll be fine. And then this one, well, you just have to reknit it, but at least you know what you're doing. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But it gave me this great idea, since I like modifying things so much, and I like Franken sleeves, and we talked about Franken sleeves on here before. My last Franken sleeve was because I started knitting up, and then I decided to knit the whole thing down, and I just decided to like put the cuff on, Kitchener the cuff onto the sleeve that was already knit down. Well, this will be another Franken sleeve if I can manage it. And what I'm gonna do is basically pick up stitches here, and then cut it, pull this out, pull out this whole section, and then graft the cuff at, you know, do one round down here where I do the increases so that I have the 6 extra stitches that I need to get up to here. Increase down here, and then graft these 2 pieces together. Then I can continue my increases because the sleeve will be that much shorter. So I'll have this much more room on the top to do the rest of my increases. And I don't have to knit sleeve number 3. So I am like paddling off Sleeve Island as fast as possible. And if I only had a little bit more brain power in the evenings, my darn day job keeps getting in the way, I would have finished both these sleeves by now. I did cast on for the other sleeve, and with the other sleeve I just basically, let's see, where's the beginning? Where am I beginning at? There it is. I basically did what I'm gonna do on the other sleeve, which is to say after the cuff ends, I added 6 extra stitches to bring me up so that my pattern repeat, this pattern repeat that you saw where I add the extra little guy in here, this guy right here, that's where I'm starting this pattern. So I have these 2 right here, right from the start. So there'll be less white space. There, that's my, that's my, whatchamajigger? You know, the spinner thing that you put the yarn on? Oh my gosh. A ball winder and a Swift. A Swift. Wow. That's how much brain power I actually have at this point. Not even enough to remember the name of that. So I'm beginning this pattern with the repeat already built in, the increasing in pattern already built in. And I'm going to work a few of those little diamonds kind of to just be placeholders in between these 2 until I get up to enough space to do one of these big guys. So that's it. And if I can get motivated enough to have some brain power in the evenings, I will be finishing those sleeves off. And then it's just a lot of cabling and decreases for the arm shaping, and should be good to go. So Sleeve Island, paddling off. It's gonna be okay. And I should say the reason I hit my Swift is because I'm actually filming in the yarn room. I'm trying it out because the last like setup I had for this cast was getting to be a little onerous. I was dragging everything into our bedroom where there was a nice window with light, and then I would have to like clear out all the clothes we had hanging on hooks and like close the closet doors and bring the lights and the camera in there and bring the model in there, and it was getting to be like crazy talk. So now I've got it set up in my yarn room. I came in here one night when I didn't have any brain power to knit, and I rearranged all the yarn and I rearranged all the books and I moved things out of the way, and so we're actually in the yarn room, and you can see some yarn bins behind my lady over there, full of potential. And I have one of my sheep posters up over here. I have another one that I'm staring at, which is my Katie Green Bean poster of British sheep breeds, which I love. And I need to give you guys a tour of the yarn room at some point. That's what I'm realizing. So anyway, maybe on the next cast. Okay, so the next little thing I wanted to talk about was Norwegian yarn, because since we're doing this knits in translation gambit here, I was really curious about trying to find some actual Norwegian yarn. And you'll remember that for this sweater, the one I'm working on right now, I'm using a John Arbonne Knit by Numbers DK weight yarn, which is 100% pure Falkland wool, and it's really gorgeous. And I've talked about it on here before as like giving a beautiful finish. I'm very curious to see what it'll look like when the full sweater's washed and what happens. But I was thinking that it would be even cooler to knit sweaters, you know, Norwegian sweaters with Norwegian yarn. So I got to talking with Layla, who's been an amazing source of information about Norwegian patterns and Norwegian yarns, and she gave me a total rundown on a lot of Norwegian yarns, a kind of like who's who of Norwegian yarn brands. And so I kind of like started searching around to see where I could get them. And a lot of us know shipping internationally is really pretty expensive. And what I was trying to find were sources for yarn for me that were in North America at least. And I found a ton. So I wanted to share that information with you guys in case you're interested in getting in on some Norwegian knitting and you want to do it with Norwegian yarn. So one of the things that Layla mentioned is that the Dale Garn, where I got my pattern from, that their yarn isn't actually produced with a lot of Norwegian wool. It's produced, like she said, some very small percentage of it is Norwegian wool. And she gave me the names of a couple other companies that are really invested in using Norwegian wool. And one of them was Rauna, and the other was Hilsvag. I'm probably mispronouncing everything. So I looked around at some Rauna, and I found these guys. And I'm going to knit a sweater for Spencer out of another free Norwegian pattern that I found, and it's going to be in these colors. This is going to be the main color, and then these are the two contrast colors for the sleeves and the body. And this is Rauma's Strikkegarn, which is a, is it a 4-ply? I'm trying to pick up here. It's 108 meters for 50 grams. And that didn't show up very well on the camera, did it at all? I'm looking to see how many plies it is. I think it's a 3-ply. Yeah, it's a 3-ply yarn. Let me show you one of the colors that's actually going to show up a little better on the camera. So Rauma has a bunch of different types of yarn, and you can check them out. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in the show notes for you if you're interested in where to get these yarns and which ones are stocked or you can source in North America. One of the other ones that I checked out because Layla mentioned it specifically is Hilsvag yarn, and this is actually, she said the factory, the mill that they produce this yarn in is pretty near her town. So she actually has gone over there. They offer mill tours and things like that. And here's a little really cool picture on the label. I think it's probably of the mill. I wonder. So she actually went to visit the mill and gave me a little info about the tour and everything. And this is, again, is one kind of yarn that they have. This is a 2-ply, I believe. Yeah, 2-ply, and it's 100 grams, 260 meters, yes. And I was thinking I'd make a little hat or mittens or something out of this. I just love this color. It's this beautiful rusty kind of color, and it's not like a color that I would normally go for, but I absolutely love it. So there's another yarn. Now I bought both my Rauma for the sweater and the Hilsvag yarn from Espace Tricot, which is a yarn shop I visited in Montreal when I was up there to give a talk. So I felt a little kindred spirit with them. And they stocked both Rauma and Hilsvag yarns, which was kind of hard to find. You can find Rauma a little bit more easily, I think, than Hilsvag. But other places that you can find Norwegian yarns include the Woolly Thistle, which I absolutely love, and that is a little shop up in Maine run by Corinne. And I order pretty much all my books from her because she has an amazing eye for what's coming out and when it's coming out and how, like, which books people are going to be interested in getting. And she's actually doing a pre-order right now for a Crystal Say Forth book. So she's like my go-to for books, and she also has amazing yarn. So she has the Rauma yarn along with yarn from Finland and Denmark and just around the world, a lot of British breeds. And she's a great source for any kind of yarn because she can also order it for you. Like I have a feeling that if you ask for something, like I asked her about the Crystal Say Forth book, and then the next week she was like looking into getting it. So she's an awesome contact, and that's Corinne, who's of the Woolly Thistle, Woolly, up in Maine. You can also get Norwegian yarn, at least, from NordicFiberArts.com. and from the Yarn Guys, which is a shop in Illinois, northwestern Illinois. And one of you alerted me to this. Who was it? Franny, I think, maybe? I think so, in a long email, mentioned that there's a yarn shop right near, well, it's not quite near me because it's kind of up in Chicago, like up near the border, but still, it's in Illinois, and you can get Norwegian yarn up there. Nordski Knitting Supply and Ingelbritsen. And they're all really cool shops. They're all in North America, and if you're looking to source some Norwegian yarn, those are some cool places to go. Like I said, I'll put all the info over in the show notes just in case you're interested. And if you're interested in knowing a little bit about Norwegian wool and the breeds of sheep, I just did a little bit of looking. Isolde Teague has a great description. She has some Norwegian yarn on her website, and for a lot of the yarn she has a great description of the wool and the sheep breeds that it kind of comes from, so that's one place to go. But I've heard different things about these breeds, that they're an intermix of kind of Icelandic or Gotland, and there's a bunch of different stuff floating around out there, and I haven't figured it all out yet, but it sounds like there are some kind of like older primitive breeds, and then there's some modern breeds that have been bred for certain kinds of characteristics. And it seems like Layla mentioned that a lot of people might consider Norwegian yarn to be, it's not a merino, it's not super soft, it's a little more rustic, and I think you can see that with these two yarns, but they're, if you maybe not see it, but you could kind of feel it. It's a little more toothy, as Sarah of Fiber Trek likes to say. But I love yarns like that. I think they're just, it feels closer to the sheep, it feels closer to the farm, it feels a little closer to like actual real wool. And so I wouldn't call either of these yarns super soft, but I think you could wear them in a hat form, or definitely for outerwear, and in sweaters and things like that. I think you'd be absolutely fine. If you can, if you like Icelandic, like Lopi yarn, you'd be just fine with this stuff, because I think this stuff is a little bit finer than Icelandic. So for what it's worth, there's a little bit of a window into Norwegian yarn, and yeah, I'm hoping that on the next cast I can talk a little bit about Norwegian designers, or some of those Norwegian books that I've been meaning to talk about on here. So we're gonna do a little more Norwegian next time around. And I hope it's been fun for you guys to learn a little bit. And I'm really curious to know what you're knitting, if you're knitting with the cowl or not. And if you're not, I just love to know in the comments, like, what do you guys think about knitting with patterns that are in other languages, or working with yarns from other countries, and maybe small breeds of sheep that are more rare for wherever it is that you're knitting. So I'm knitting in North America, so there are certain things that are harder to get here, but where you are, there might be other things that are hard to get, and I'd be really curious to know, like, what are the trade-offs, what are the things you're looking for, all that kind of good stuff. So I wanted to close out this cast by just mentioning this beautiful thing on my mannequin over here. This is Melanie Berg's The Joker and the Thief shawl, and it's been out for quite some time, the pattern that is, and I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with it. Melanie Berg is a designer that I've knit shawls from her before, and I really like her style. She does a lot with the mosaic, kind of slip stitch knitting, and she's kind of like a shawl expert. She was just on Fruity Knitting a few episodes back, and it was really cool to hear her talk about her inspirations and her shawls and all the different things that go into the designing process. She has a new book out, but this pattern was included in her first book, which is Shawls. And I saw this when I was in Germany last year, maybe at this time, and I didn't pick it up, though I wish I had, so I ended up ordering it from, I think I ordered it from directly from her website, or from the Woolly Thistle probably. And the cool thing about this book, considering we're doing knits in translation, is that it is a bilingual book. So if you're interested in thinking about German knitting and English knitting, on one side of the page in any given pattern you have the German, and on the other side you have the English. So it's a great exercise in kind of like working in translation and seeing if you actually understand the pattern. Like if you were to take your German and translate it and then check the English, it's a great kind of like self-check kind of a thing. So in this book she has a bajillion shawls, but really she has, let's see how many are in here. I'm trying to remember how many she includes. I think there are about 13, is that right? Anyway, tons of shawls, and you can look it up on Ravelry to see which ones are in here. And they're really, really quite beautiful. So I'd highly recommend the book. Now, the shawl is pretty darn cool, and it's been one that I've admired for quite some time and wanted to knit. And I had a great excuse because Sweet Georgia sent me some of their yarn, which is this beautiful, from their new kind of fall line. This is Evening. I think I've talked about this on here before, maybe not. And I have 3 skeins of it, and I was thinking I might do a sweater, but I just got so excited about the shawl that I'm gonna kind of piece out the yarn that I have. Instead of doing a full sweater, right now I'm at least doing the shawl and then probably some other projects. So I used the Sweet Georgia as a background color. So I'll pull it off so you can see it a little better. It's a triangular shawl, and you start at this bottom little corner down here and knit up this way. And basically you're using your background color in for the first little tiny bit, and then at the end of the shawl you're going to really get into using that background color. So this is a picture of the actual shawl, and you can see here is all of the color work. And then you'll get into bigger patches of the background color, which for me, you can see that here as well, which for me will be this beautiful Sweet Georgia. You can see that there. So the gradient set that I'm using is actually one that I picked out from Old Crow Art Yarns, one of my favorite indie dyers, and that's Megan Morrell out in Maine as well. Maine is a theme today. So Megan Morrell had a gradient set up, and I often buy her yarn just because I love it, and I have a bin of it back there, and I very rarely knit with it because I just love looking at it in the skein. It's kind of like they're one-of-a-kind objects. They're like, it's like I feel like I'm curating a collection. But this gradient just called out once I had the Sweet Georgia in one hand and I was looking for something to complement it. This Sweet Georgia has all of these kinds of tones of greens through blues, through purples, and into kind of like a really deep brown. So it works beautifully with this gradient set that I have. And so the gradient set was called the Devil's Macaroon, and it runs from this kind of beautiful green, light green, into this darker green, into this kind of teal, and into this purple. And then I added 2 colors to it because I'm working with this dark blue. I added this light purple, which is from Eden Cottage Crafts. I think I've got that right. And this kind of brown single down here, which is a little bit of gold in it. And that is from Madeline Tosh. That was a single that I used for another scarf or shawl at some point in the past. So I had a little bit of it left. And I think it creates quite a nice contrast, the gold and the purple, with this gradient set that's kind of sitting in the middle. So that's what I did. The trick will be weaving in all these ends, which I think you can see over here. That'll take a good, afternoon of work and play, I think, to get those satisfactorily wound in. What are you gonna do? So I think that's just about it for the episode. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of a farm update if you're interested. If you're still here at minute 25 or whatever it is, the sheep have gone home for the fall. They are going to be bred with a fine ram named Merlin, and we'll have some little Corriedale baby lambs running around. So I got to say goodbye to them Thursday morning. Yeah, I rounded them all up. I gave them some kale bouquets, and even Mouse got in there and ate some kale out of my hand. I was very impressed. Dolly gave me a kiss on the nose, and I'll take that as a very sweet goodbye. And they went off to Kathy's farm. So luckily for me, the sheep are just down the road, and I visit Kathy's farm pretty frequently during the year. So I'll get to see them for shearing and maybe even lambing. And we might even get them back here. Kathy's happy to have any of her sheep come back and pasture at some point. So probably not over the winter while they're getting fed hay and they're pregnant and they're before they lamb and things. It's just safer over at Kathy's place because she has some good guardian animals. So if they do come back, it'll be next spring, and we have the pasture for them, so I would love to have them back at some point. The pasture feels very empty right now because we're so used to having the sheep out there, and they were such a nice presence. Just very I don't know, you just go out there and they were just there. Like, they didn't even need to come running over or anything, though they often did. But it was just a nice presence, and what an opportunity to have a very experienced shepherdess like Kathy give us her sheep for pasturing and to trust us with them. And teach us so much about raising them. It's just an incredible opportunity. And of course, how could we say no to that, right? And how could we say no to like learning more about sheep? So while the pasture is empty and the barn is a little empty, I kind of think our little kitty cats out there are a little happy to have some space to themselves, and the chickens too. So that's farm update for you. And in the meantime, I hope you have some good knitting time. Happy Rhinebeck to all of you who are out there at the festival. I swear one of these years I'm gonna get out there. We had a soccer tournament this weekend. Last year I think there was a soccer tournament. So maybe when I'm older and wiser, I'll make my way out to Rhinebeck and see all of you who are out there. But if you're out there, have a blast. I can't wait to see all your photos and hear all the stories, and I will catch you guys in a couple of weeks. Happy knitting. Take care.
Now, this all happened like one night. She had like insomnia one night. Did you tell the whole story? She's like up all night reading Norwegian sweater patterns.
I'm not reading them, just looking at them and drooling, and then